The moment I saw Karen's SUV barreling down my private road like she owned the place, I knew it was time to stop being nice. The tires kicked up a thick cloud of dust, coating my freshly washed truck in a fine layer of dirt. Again, I clenched my jaw as she rolled right past me without so much as a wave, not even a nod of acknowledgement. Just the usual entitled oblivion that made my blood pressure spike. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the 10th. It was the 100th, maybe more. But this time, something inside me snapped. If Karen wanted to use my road so badly, then she was going to pay for the privilege. I had bought this property for peace, for privacy, for the joy of sitting on my porch without dealing with nosy neighbors and their unnecessary drama. The land came with a long, well-maintained private road that led straight to my house, a road I personally graveled and kept in top condition. It wasn't connected to the HOA, and that was exactly why I bought it. No rules. No arbitrary fines. No ridiculous power trip. But Karen, the self-declared queen of the neighborhood, saw things differently. She saw my road as a shortcut, a convenient way to bypass the stop signs and speed bumps the HOA had put in to slow down reckless drivers. She saw it as hers. At first, I let it go. It wasn't worth the hassle to fight over something so small. It was just one car, I reasoned. What harm could it do? Then it was 2. Then 5. Then an entire caravan of HOA members, zipping through like my driveway was a public highway. Karen, of course, was leading the charge, waving at me like I was some kind of security guard stationed at her personal toll booth. I tried to be civil. I reminded her, politely at first, that this was private property, that she and the HOA had no claim to it. She laughed, like I had just told the world's funniest joke. "Oh, sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This road is part of the community. You can't just keep people out. That's not neighborly." I reminded her again, not so politely this time, that I wasn't part of the HOA and that the road was quite literally mine. I even showed her the property deed. She smiled, completely unfazed. "Well, you should be part of the HOA. It's what keeps neighborhoods like this safe and orderly." Safe and orderly? I stared at the SUVs tearing through my road at full speed, kicking up gravel, and nearly running over my dog the previous week. Yeah, real safe. Then came the complaints, the letters, the passive-aggressive notes stuffed into my mailbox about how my road wasn't being maintained properly and how, as a resident of the community, I had an obligation to keep it clean. Karen took it a step further, hosting an impromptu HOA meeting on my driveway, claiming that they were discussing future developments for the neighborhood. I walked out onto my porch that day to find a dozen lawn chairs lined up, HOA members sipping lemonade like they were at a Sunday picnic. I told them, in no uncertain terms, to get the hell off my property. That's when Karen did what Karen does best, she got petty. She told delivery drivers that my road was an official HOA access point. She rerouted traffic through my land, increasing the daily car count from a few occasional trespassers to a full-blown parade. The audacity of it all wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. But what finally pushed me over the edge was the moment she stood in my driveway, arms crossed, and informed me that the HOA had taken a vote. "We've decided," she announced with the smug confidence of a monarch issuing a decree, "that your road is an essential part of the neighborhood's infrastructure. It wouldn't be fair to restrict access to something so necessary." I blinked. "You took a vote?" She nodded, beaming. "Unanimous decision." I rubbed my temples. "You do realize this is private property, right? You can't just vote to take something that doesn't belong to you." She gave me that patronizing smile again. "You'll understand in time. We're all about community here." I don't remember exactly what I said next, but I know it was loud, probably full of words that would make my mother clutch her pearls. Karen huffed, waved a dismissive hand, and strutted back to her car, as if she had won some imaginary battle. That night, I sat on my porch with a cold beer in hand, staring at the tire marks littering my once pristine gravel road. I thought about all the times I had let things slide, about all the times I had swallowed my irritation just to avoid unnecessary conflict. And then I thought about Karen's smug little smirk, the way she had practically declared my land as hers with nothing more than an HOA vote. No more. If Karen wanted to use my road so badly, she could pay for the privilege. The next morning, I got to work. I had a buddy who ran a fencing company, and within a few days, we had installed a beautiful, heavy-duty metal gate right at the entrance of my road. A sleek, shiny keypad sat at the side, waiting for a toll payment before it would open. I set the fee at a fair price, $10 per use. Not outrageous, but enough to make a point. The sign next to the gate read, "Private property. Toll road in effect. Residents welcome, for a fee." Karen saw it before I even had the chance to tell her. The shriek that erupted from her driveway could probably be heard 2 states over. She stormed over within minutes, her shoes clicking against the pavement like an approaching storm. "What the hell is this?" "It's a toll gate," I said casually, sipping my coffee. "You can't be serious." I held up the property deed. "Serious as a heart attack. You want to use my road? You pay the toll." Her face turned a remarkable shade of red, somewhere between a ripe tomato and an overheated lobster. "You can't charge people to drive on a community road." "But it's not a community road, Karen," I said slowly, as if explaining basic math to a kindergartner. "It's mine. And since you and the HOA decided it was essential, I figured I'd start charging for essential services." She sputtered, her lips moving but no words coming out. It was beautiful. Then she did exactly what I expected her to do. She called the police. 2 officers showed up, looking mildly amused as Karen launched into a dramatic retelling of how I was holding the community hostage and illegally charging innocent families just trying to get home. The officers listened, nodded, and then turned to me. I handed over my paperwork, and within minutes, they were chuckling as they explained to Karen that, yes, I was entirely within my legal rights. The look on her face was priceless. "This isn't over," she hissed before stomping away. Oh, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen wasn't the type to take a loss gracefully. But as I leaned against my brand-new toll gate, watching the sun set over my now car-free road, I smiled. She had picked the wrong guy to mess with. The gate stood tall, gleaming under the morning sun like a monument of justice. It was beautiful, sturdy, impenetrable, and, most importantly, Karen-proof. I had spent the better part of the weekend making sure it was installed properly, and now, as I stood with my coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood react to it, I knew I had done the right thing. Karen, of course, lost her mind. She pulled up to the gate that morning, fully expecting to sail through my property like she always did. Instead, she was met with cold, hard steel and a bright yellow sign that read, "Private property, toll required." I had a front-row seat from my porch as she rolled down her window, leaned out, and just stared at it like her eyes were deceiving her. Then, as if hoping it would disappear, she revved her engine and honked her horn. The gate did not care. The gate did not move. I sipped my coffee and waited. A minute passed before she finally got out of her car, marching up to the keypad with an expression that promised a meltdown. She pressed a button. The screen lit up, displaying the toll fee, $10 per use. She actually gasped. A hand flew to her chest as if I had just insulted her entire lineage. Then, without missing a beat, she turned on her heel and stormed towards my porch. "This is ridiculous," she shouted before even reaching the steps. I took another sip of my coffee. "Morning, Karen. You can't do this." She pointed at the gate like it was some kind of personal attack. "This is illegal. You're extorting people." I shook my head. "Nope. Just charging for services. The same way toll roads work. You said yourself the road was essential, right? Essential things cost money." She clenched her jaw so hard I thought she might crack a tooth. "You can't charge people to access their own community." I leaned against the porch railing, enjoying the show. "Sure I can. It's my road, remember? Not HOA property. You and your friends have been using it for free. That's over now. Her face was priceless, an ever-changing swirl of fury, disbelief, and the dawning realization that she had absolutely no power here. She spun on her heel, stomped back to her car, and, for the first time since moving in, she was forced to take the long way around. I expected resistance, but I underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go to get her way. First, she tried intimidation. Later that day, I caught her blocking my driveway with her car, arms crossed, eyes full of petty determination. She refused to move, standing there like some kind of guardian of righteousness, telling me that she was protesting the unjust taxation of the community. I calmly called a tow truck. She barely had time to sputter out an objection before her car was being hauled away, her expression shifting from righteous fury to outright panic. Next, she tried rallying the neighborhood against me. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail from the HOA, officially demanding that I remove the gate immediately. They cited community safety concerns and claimed I was violating neighborhood harmony. I almost laughed. The best part? At the bottom of the letter, Karen had personally added a note that read, "Failure to comply will result in serious action." I sent back a copy of my property deed with a note of my own. It read, "Nice try. Toll's still $10. The real fun began when I started noticing which neighbors actually didn't mind the toll. As it turned out, not everyone was a Karen. Plenty of people were happy to pay a few dollars if it meant avoiding the congested HOA road. Within a week, I had collected enough in toll fees to cover the cost of the gate installation. By the second week, I was turning a profit. Karen, of course, refused to pay. Instead, she continued taking the long way around, her anger growing with each passing day. Every time she drove past my property, I could feel the rage radiating from her car. It was almost entertaining. Almost. Then she escalated. One evening, I noticed something strange on my security cameras. Karen and a few of her HOA cronies had gathered near the entrance of my road, whispering among themselves. They were up to something. I stayed inside and watched, curious to see just how desperate she had become. A few minutes later, one of them pulled out a bolt cutter. I almost laughed out loud. She was really about to commit felony-level vandalism just to get past my gate. Before she could make the first cut, I turned on my porch lights and stepped outside. "Hey, Karen," I called out. "Need some help?" She froze. Everyone did. For a second, it was pure comedy. They were caught red-handed, bolt cutters in hand, guilt plastered all over their faces. Then, as if deciding that the best defense was a good offense, Karen puffed out her chest and glared at me. "You can't block public access," she barked, as if she wasn't about to destroy private property 5 seconds ago. I crossed my arms. "This isn't public access. And you just tried to vandalize my property. I've got it all on camera." The color drained from her face. The guy holding the bolt cutters slowly, very slowly, lowered them to his side. Karen opened her mouth, probably to spew more nonsense, but I held up my phone and wiggled it in the air. "Want me to call the cops, or do you want to leave?" For a moment, she hesitated, staring at me like she was weighing the consequences of her next move. Then, without a word, she turned around and marched back toward her car, her group following like a bunch of kids caught sneaking out past curfew. The next morning, another HOA letter arrived. This one was more desperate. Karen had apparently called an emergency board meeting and decided that my gate was a hazardous obstruction. They were threatening legal action now. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. I knew what was coming. Karen wasn't the type to take a loss gracefully. She had exhausted all her petty schemes, and now she was going to take the only route left, a lawsuit. I finished my coffee, pocketed the letter, and smiled. Let her try. I knew Karen wouldn't give up easily, but even I wasn't prepared for how far she was willing to go. The lawsuit arrived exactly 1 week after the bolt cutter incident. a thick, aggressively stapled stack of legal jargon, hand-delivered by a smug-looking HOA board member who strutted up to my porch like he had just served me a death sentence. I flipped through the first few pages, barely containing a smirk as I saw the allegations. According to Karen, my gate was an unlawful obstruction of a public access road and a deliberate act of aggression against the community. She was demanding that I remove it immediately or face severe legal consequences. I glanced up at the guy who delivered it, who was still standing there like he expected me to burst into tears. "Tell Karen I'll see her in court," I said, shutting the door in his face. If Karen thought a lawsuit was going to scare me, she was in for a rude awakening. I had done my homework. My road was private, my gate was legal, and I had every right to charge for its use. The problem was, Karen was an expert at making things unnecessarily complicated. Over the next few weeks, she went on a full-scale propaganda campaign. Flyers were taped to mailboxes claiming I was holding the neighborhood hostage. Emails circulated about how my gate was hurting property values. One particularly dramatic letter accused me of creating a financial burden on families by forcing them to choose between their wallets and their safety. It would have been hilarious if it weren't so exhausting. Every day, someone had something to say about my so-called greedy toll road. Some people sided with me, knowing exactly what kind of person Karen was. Others were just upset they had to drive the long way around because they refused to pay a measly $10. Then the HOA started getting desperate. Someone from their board, probably Karen herself, filed a complaint with the county, claiming that my gate violated local zoning laws. An inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, looking ready to find something, anything, that would make me remove it. I walked him through the paperwork, showed him the property deed, and let him see the security footage of Karen's little bolt cutter stunt. By the time he left, he was shaking his head, muttering about how ridiculous the whole situation was. Still, Karen wasn't done. The court date finally arrived, and I was fully prepared to watch her embarrass herself. Karen, dressed like she was about to deliver a TED Talk on neighborhood morality, had come armed with a folder of documents and a level of confidence that could only be described as delusional. The judge, a no-nonsense type who looked like he had dealt with one too many HOA disputes, barely let her finish her opening argument before cutting her off with a sigh. "Let me get this straight," he said, rubbing his temples. "You're claiming this man's private road is public property because you don't want to take the long way around?" Karen's eye twitched. "It's a vital access point for the community." "Vital?" The judge flipped through the document. "From what I see here, the road isn't registered as an HOA easement. It belongs to the defendant, who is legally allowed to regulate its use. So why exactly are we here today?" Karen launched into a speech about community well-being and shared responsibility, but the judge looked unimpressed. I was enjoying the show until she pulled out what she thought was her trump card, a so-called petition signed by dozens of neighbors, stating that my gate was unfair and should be removed. It would have been convincing, if not for one small problem. I had security footage of Karen going door to door, practically forcing people to sign it. Some of them had even reached out to me beforehand, apologizing and admitting they only signed it because they didn't want to deal with her wrath. When my lawyer presented the footage, the entire courtroom went silent. The judge sighed again, looking more annoyed than ever. "Miss Karen," he said, rubbing his forehead like he was getting a migraine, "you do realize that falsifying a petition can be considered fraudulent behavior?" Karen's face went through several shades of red before settling on a deep, furious purple. I was only trying to do what's best for the neighborhood," she stammered. The judge dismissed her case faster than I could blink. Not only did Karen lose, but she was ordered to pay for my legal fees as well. The look on her face when she realized she had to hand over thousands of dollars to the very person she was trying to take down? Worth every second of this entire ordeal. But the best part came afterward. As we were leaving the courthouse, the judge casually suggested something I hadn't even considered. If your road is so valuable to them, he mused, why not sell them access? It was like a light bulb went off in my head. The HOA wanted my road so badly? Fine. They could have it, but at a price. The negotiations were glorious. Karen, now significantly quieter after her public humiliation, had no choice but to sit there as I laid out the terms. If they wanted the HOA to have legal access to my road, they would have to buy an easement from me. And it wasn't going to be cheap. By the time the deal was finalized, the HOA was paying me a hefty annual fee for access, enough to more than cover my property taxes and then some. The toll gate remained, but now it was exclusively for non-residents, meaning anyone outside the HOA still had to pay if they wanted to use the shortcut. Karen, thoroughly defeated, resigned from the HOA board within a month. I heard she moved away shortly after, claiming the neighborhood had been ruined by greed. I celebrated the victory the only way I knew how, by throwing a party on my newly profitable road. Neighbors who had stuck by me showed up, laughing and clinking their drinks together as we watched cars roll through, each one adding a little more cash to my pocket. Someone even suggested renaming the road in Karen's honor. And so, with a freshly printed sign, the road was officially christened Karen Tollway. The whole thing started as a petty dispute over a shortcut. But in the end, I walked away with a steady income, a Karen-free neighborhood, and the satisfaction of knowing that for the rest of time, anyone who wanted to drive down my road would have to pay for the privilege. Sometimes, justice isn't just served. Sometimes, it collects a toll.